When was the last time that you did something for someone else? For some of you, this might be easy to answer, but for others of us, it might be a little bit harder. But when was the last time that you did something for someone else? So this last week, I went on a missions trip with my basketball team. We went to the Dominican Republic, and it was an awesome week, but it was a crazy week as well. Our first flight was supposed to leave the Indy airport at 5:30. And I'm guessing that most of you know the rule about when to arrive at the airport, right? Get there 1.5 hours, maybe 2 hours before the flight leaves. We decided to get there an hour before our flight left, okay? And there were 19 people in our group, and so it took a little bit to get our bags checked. We were flying internationally, and we get through security, and there's a pretty long line. So we're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna miss our flight. And we finally get through security, and we get through security at 5:20. Okay, and our flight leaves at 5:30. So we're like quickly putting on our shoes and we start sprinting towards our gate. And literally right when we walk up to the gate, we look out the window and we see our plane backing out of the gate. We missed our flight. And that caused some problems. We had to catch a couple different flights. We ended up staying the night in Miami, and we were a day late on our trip. But it was a great week. And we got to serve in a really cool community. And one of the local leaders in this community, he went around to all the kids, and he basically just asked them, what do you guys like to do for fun? And the kids basically explained that there's just not much for them to do. This community, think of a neighborhood, but it's just dirt everywhere. There's no soccer fields, no baseball fields, there's no playgrounds, no parks, there's just nothing for them to do. And so the local leader thought that it would be a great idea if we built a basketball court right next to the church in this neighborhood. And so that was our project for the week. But fast forward to the end of the week, and if I had to put the impact that the trip had on me into one word, I would say that it was convicting. I say that because this community had nothing, right? A lot of people would look at this community and just think poverty. But God, He allowed me to see beauty in this community because these people, they had joy, they had contentment, and they truly loved the people around them. This week, it was about going and building a basketball court, but I feel like God, through this week, He taught me something that changed my life forever. And I think one of the cool things about serving is that it usually impacts and changes both sides that are involved. Serving, it's a way to show others the love of Jesus and potentially even change their life, but serving is also a way that God can transform and change our own life. Through serving, we can deepen our faith and we can grow our faith into one that will last well beyond when you guys graduate and leave this ministry. So when was the last time that you did something for someone else? Can you think of it? If not, then maybe lean in a little bit tonight because I think this is going to be, or hopefully it's encouraging and it can push you in the right direction. Because the truth is that when it comes to the Christian faith, serving is one of those things that we can often overlook and even neglect. When we think about the Christian faith and the Christian walk, we think about things like reading our Bible, praying, going to small group, and those are all huge things and things that we should be doing. But often serving is something that we can overlook. My guess is that a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us in here might neglect serving. We either just don't think about it or we just choose to use our time in a different way. But the truth is that serving, it's something small that can have a huge impact on your faith and on your life. And as Christians, we need to make serving a habit in our life, and that's what I want to spend some time talking about tonight. So we're going to look at John chapter 13, and this is the story that most of you are probably familiar with. It's when Jesus washes his disciples' feet. We're not going to read this whole story. I'm just going to summarize it for us. But just some context around this story before we get into it. John chapter 13, it's a major pivot in the book of John. So the first 12 chapters leading up to this point, it's all about Jesus' life. It's all about his ministry, him doing miracles. And then we arrive to John chapter 13. And 13 through 17, these are all the different things that Jesus said to his disciples on the last night that he was alive. So we pivot away from Jesus' life, and now we're at the end of his life. And in our story for tonight, we find Jesus and we find all of his disciples sharing a meal together. They're all gathered around, they're sharing a meal, and then Jesus, he gets up from the meal, he puts a towel around his waist, he fills a bowl with water, he gets on his knees and he starts to wash his disciples' feet. And once he gets done, he goes back to his spot and he basically just explains what he's done. He says, I'm your Lord, I'm your teacher, yet I have just washed your feet. And then he says, as I have done this for you, so you should go and do this for other people. And then the night keeps going, and Jesus predicts that Judas is going to betray him. And then the text literally says that Judas gets up and he leaves the dinner to go and do this. And then Jesus, he ends the meal by giving the disciples a new command. And these are the verses that we're going to focus on for tonight, and I want to read them. Verses 34 and 35 from John 13. They say, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. In these words, Jesus, he raises the bar like he so often did. Some of you might be familiar with the silver rule or the golden rule. Maybe your parents used this when you were younger, but the silver rule is don't do to others what you wouldn't want them to do to you. Right? So if you don't want someone pushing you, if you don't want someone talking behind your back or making fun of you, then you shouldn't do those things to them. The golden rule, and Pastor Andrew Philbeck actually talked about this in church this morning, the golden rule is to do to others as you would have them do to you. So if you want someone to be loving and encouraging and compassionate towards you, then you should be loving and encouraging and compassionate towards them. But here, Jesus, he gives us the platinum rule. He raises the bar once again, and he says that we should do to other people as he has done for us. As Jesus has loved us, so we should love other people. Jesus says that if we are truly his disciples, then we will love and serve other people in the same way that he has loved and served us. And so now we have to ask the question, how did Jesus serve us? And this leads us into our first point for tonight, which is that Jesus served others by humbling himself. Jesus served others by humbling himself. If you know about Jesus' life, then you know that he was a man that was primarily focused on other people. Right? He almost never thought about himself, but the mission, the goal, the purpose of his life was to serve and to love other people. In fact, Jesus, he never put himself above other people, but he was always putting others above himself. Romans 15:3, it says, for even Christ did not live to please himself. He just wasn't concerned about himself. He was just more concerned about other people. And when we look at our story for tonight, we have to take note of the way that Jesus humbles himself. During this time, foot washing, it was one of the most lowly and humiliating tasks that a person could have done. But here we find God in human flesh as the person who's on his knees washing their feet. Through this, Jesus is showing us that there's no act of service that's beneath us. There's not a need that we could find that we should not be willing to help meet. In the story, we didn't read it, but if you read it, you'll see that Peter even reacted to Jesus washing their feet, and he tried to stop Jesus because he would have understood how lowly of a task this was. But through this, Jesus, he shows us that the first step in serving others is first humbling ourselves. He shows us that there's no one above serving, right? Because Jesus, he would have been the last person that we would expect to be on his knees washing their feet. He was the most important person in the room, yet he is the one scrubbing dirty feet. In this, he is showing us that no one is above serving. No matter how significant, how important, how popular, how cool we might think we are still called to serve other people. And the first step in doing that is humbling ourselves. If I were to define humility for us, I would say that humility is thinking more about other people and thinking about ourselves less. Humility is thinking more about others and thinking about ourselves less. Philippians 2:3-4, I think it defines it really well. It says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of the others. And serving takes humility because when you're serving, in that moment, it's not about you. You're not focused on yourself or how you can benefit or gain, but rather you are focused on other people. So like I said, this last week, we had a missions trip, and our goal of the trip was to build a basketball court. And what the people there wanted us to do first was build a gated fence around the perimeter. And so when we showed up at our work site, it was literally just this field. And when we got down there, there were these spray painted lines around the outside of the field. And they said that they wanted us to dig these 4 to 5 foot deep trenches. 4 to 5 feet deep. That's like up to here. We're digging down 4 to 5 feet all the way around this perimeter. It was really hard. I'm not going to lie. It was really hard. There are a lot of times that I'm just thinking to myself, what am I doing? Like, I'm drenched in sweat. I'm dirty. I'm exhausted. We'd be out. We'd go out early in the morning. We'd dig for hours. We'd go in. We'd get lunch, and we'd come out, and we'd dig some more. And while we were digging, there was really one thing that kept me going. I had to keep reminding myself of who I was doing this for, of the kids in this community that we were doing this for. Because growing up, I had everything that I ever could have wanted. All right, most of my childhood was spent outside playing sports. If I wanted to play basketball, literally all I had to do was walk out my garage and I had a hoop on my driveway. And some of my best memories growing up were playing basketball on that goal. But the kids in this community, they don't have that opportunity. And so while I'm digging these ditches or digging these trenches, I'm just reminding myself of these kids. I'm not thinking about how tired, how exhausted, how sore I am, but instead I'm thinking about the kids in this community. That's what humility is. Humility is thinking more about others and thinking less about ourselves. If we want to show Jesus' love to the people around us, if we want to serve others in the same way that Jesus did, then it starts with first humbling ourselves. Here's the second thing that I want us to see from the story tonight. It's that Jesus served others with his time. Jesus served others with his time. In our story for tonight, Jesus, he gave up his time for them. Okay, this meal, it was taking place on the last night that Jesus was still alive. Tomorrow, Jesus would be hanging on a cross. The last night that he's still alive, he wanted to make the point to serve his disciples. Jesus knew what awaited him tomorrow. He was well aware of the circumstances. The first couple verses of the chapter, they talk about how he knew it was time for him to return to the Father. He knew that his time on earth was done, but he wanted to make one final point to show the disciples what true love looked like, to serve his disciples one more time. And so he humbles himself, he drops to his knees, and he washes their feet. But what's really interesting to me about this story is that in verse 2, it says that the evening meal was already in progress. Okay, so foot washing in this time, it was a common form of hospitality. Right? If you went over to someone's house, their way to welcome you and show hospitality towards you was to wash their feet. But verse 2 says that the evening meal was already in progress, which tells us that Jesus washing his disciples' feet in this moment had nothing to do with hospitality. Him washing their feet had everything to do with him wanting to serve and love them. On the last night of his life, the last night that he's still alive, Jesus, he takes the time to do one of the most lowly tasks that there was so he could show his disciples what true love looked like. In today's world, time, it's your greatest tool, right? Time is one of the most important things. It's the most sought after thing. Our days, our lives, everything revolves around time. There's a Greek philosopher that has a quote about time that I like. He said, "Time is the most valuable thing that a man can spend." Right? Because time, when you spend it, you can't get it back. You can't get any more time. Time is everything. And my guess is that almost everyone in here would say that they're pretty busy. Right? If we went around, my guess is that most of us in here would say that we're pretty busy. And I know there's some truth in that. I know that is the case for a lot of us, but I also know that there will be time to serve if we make time to serve. Ultimately, you will make time for what is most important to you, and serving is no exception. Because serving is about sacrifice. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be convenient. It's not always going to be comfortable. But we are called to serve other people, and in order to do that, we have to sacrifice our time. So my challenge is to make time to serve. I'm not saying you have to carve out 2 to 3 hours every day to serve, but what would it look like for you to carve out 1 hour once a week or twice a week or once a week or once every other week or once a month? What would it look like to carve out just 1 hour to serve and to volunteer somewhere? Something that I've been doing for the last few years, I did it a few years in high school and even these last couple years in college, is I've been volunteering in a mentoring program. And so for 1 hour, once a week, I go to a local elementary school and I sit down with a young kid. Our time each week, it looks a little bit different. Sometimes we work on homework together. Sometimes if he's having some disciplinary problems in his class, then we'll talk about that. Other times we'll set goals and talk about how we can reach those goals. Other times we'll go to the gym and we'll play basketball or play football. But once a week, for 1 hour, I'm sacrificing time and I'm going to this elementary school to try to serve and love the community. What would it look like for you to set aside a little bit of time to serve? Maybe for you, it looks like helping out in Bibleopolis, or 56 and 78, or the Impact Center, or going to an elderly home and visiting with the people there, or helping out in an after-school program, helping out with family fun night. What would it look like for you to sacrifice a little bit of time once a week, once every other week, once a month, to volunteer to serve people and to spread the love of Jesus? There are so many different places in our community, so many different places in your guys' backyards that would love to have someone just like you willing to help out and volunteer. It doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter when it is. What matters is that we're willing to humble ourselves, to sacrifice our time, and to serve the people around us. But we have to understand that serving, it takes time. We saw in this story that Jesus, he sacrifices his time to serve the people around us. And if we want to serve people like Jesus did, then we have to do the same. Here's our last point for tonight. It's that Jesus served others by meeting needs. Jesus served others by meeting the needs around him. So I believe that Jesus washes his disciples' feet for two reasons. Okay, the first, I believe that Jesus washed his disciples' feet because their feet needed to be washed. Okay, think about during this time, there's a couple of factors that go into this. One, they walked everywhere. Okay, they didn't have nice cars like we do, but they walked everywhere. Two, they're walking in extreme heat. Three, they don't have shoes. They're either walking barefoot or they're wearing sandals. You put all that stuff together, they're going to have some pretty nasty feet. Okay, so their feet needed to be washed. Foot washing in this time, it was just an important daily hygiene, like we might think of bathing or brushing our teeth or putting on deodorant. It was just something that they did. And Jesus, he washes his disciples' feet because they needed it. But more important than that, Jesus washing his disciples' feet is a foreshadowing to the cross, when Jesus would meet the biggest need that the disciples had. The disciples' greatest need, our greatest need, is that we are sinners separated from God. And God, he sends his only son, he sends Jesus to this earth to live the perfect life that we could not live and die the death that we deserve so that whoever believes in him will not perish, but be able to live with God for an eternity. That's our deepest need. That is our greatest need. And our story for tonight, that is just a foreshadowing to the cross of what would happen the very next day when Jesus would meet the deepest need in our life. Time and time again in Scripture, we see Jesus display his love for other people through meeting their needs. Whether it's a physical need, whether it's a spiritual need, Jesus was always looking to meet the needs around him. And the way that we can love and serve other people is by meeting the needs that we see around us. It doesn't matter if it's a big need, it doesn't matter if it's a small need, but what matters is that we're willing to humble ourselves and meet the needs that we see. So one example, a couple weeks ago I was working out in the CLC, and most mornings in the CLC they have some sort of class. Okay, so I'm finishing up my workout, and some people that were going to this class, they start coming in, and I saw this one woman, she came in, she put her stuff on the bleachers, and then she just took a lap around the gym. I was a little curious, and so I start watching her, and I noticed that she started picking up every single piece of trash that she saw. She was getting under the bleachers, she was getting behind them, she was getting in the corners. She literally picked up every single piece of trash in the gym. This wasn't something that she had to do. Someone would eventually do it, but she saw a need, she saw trash, and so she wanted to help meet that need and serve someone else. For you, it can be something as small as that, just picking up trash around you when you see it. Or you might be encouraged to do something a little bit bigger like some of our senior girls. Some of our senior girls, they've decided to work together to meet a real need in the Fairfax community. And I know it's still early in the planning process with this, but their plan is to come together, is to raise money to provide a dinner for a family in the Fairfax community during the Christmas time. And not only are they going to try to provide a dinner for this family, but they're going to try to raise enough money to buy Christmas presents for the kids that they can give to the parents, and then the parents can give to their kids. They saw a need, they know a need in the Fairfax community, and so they're doing what they can to help meet this need. And I think the coolest part about this whole thing is that they said they're doing this because they want the family to see and experience the love of Jesus. Guys, that's what it looks like to serve like Jesus. They learned about a need in their community, and they decided to take action in order to help meet this need. And they're doing this so that the love of Jesus would be on display. Going back to our main verses for tonight, at the end of our story, Jesus says, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." So here's my challenge for tonight. It's make it a habit to serve. Make it a habit to serve. Serving, it's a call that Jesus has given every single one of us. And not only that, but serving, it's one of the most important things that a Christian can do, but the truth is that it's often a thing that we can overlook and even neglect. In our story for tonight, Jesus, he models for us what it looks like to love others through service, and the best part is that every single person in this room can follow that model. You, as a high school student, you can show people the love of Jesus. We, as a community and a church, we can show the world who Jesus is if we're willing to humble ourselves, if we're willing to sacrifice our time, and then we're willing to meet the needs that we see around us. And when we do this, when we step out in faith and when we serve other people, not only will our own faith grow, but the church will grow and the kingdom of God will grow as well. I want to end with a quick story. So at the end of our mission trip, the last night, the next day we're hopping on a plane, we're coming back to the States. Our last night there, the missionary that we were with throughout the week, he had us all get in a big circle, and we just kind of had a time of debrief. We just talked about the trip, what stuck out to us, what we experienced, the things that God was teaching us. And then at the end, he just started thanking us. He thanked us for coming down. He thanked us for being willing to serve and do some hard work. He thanked us for our attitudes during all of that. And then he said something that I'll never forget. He said, "You were a light for the community this week. Thank you for showing this community what the love of Jesus looks like." That's why we serve. We serve to show others who Jesus is and the love that he has for them. And in return, the cool thing is that we often deepen and strengthen our own faith as well.